Okay, so to bring us home today, we have Provaris Energy. Provaris Energy trading under the ASX code PV1 with a market cap of 27 million. The company is well advanced in the development of integrated supply chain for the production, storage, and marine transport of hydrogen, which it has now receiving the focus of German utilities who are reliant on imports to meet their demand requirements by 2027. Presenting for us today is Provaris MD and CEO, Martin Carolan. Martin, warm welcome. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks to everyone who's joined this afternoon. So, as described, Martin Carolan, I'm the CEO of the company. We are quickly now progressing through to what we see as the major key catalysts and milestones for both technology and commercialization, and our focus is developing integrated solutions for hydrogen in Europe. If we could move to the second slide, please. For the next one. So if we look at the macro elements first of this industry, so global decarbonisation commenced in 2019 with net zero targets, and that created a new market for energy transition and green fuels, and particularly hydrogen. So seen as one of the pillars for decarbonisation. Already, the market's approaching 100 million tonnes by 2030. It's dominated by point of production and the inter-process consumption. So there's really been no major material global seaborne market. Interestingly, 98% of that hydrogen is being produced with fossil fuels. So it already generates a significant level of CO2 emissions. So that alone as a market is looking to shift to cleaner sources, or low carbon as they refer, and green is one of those. If you look at the decarbonisation of industries, you have another 100 million tonnes by 2030 that's evolving. So this is not a cookie cutter for all industries. It's clearly focused on those energy intensive sectors. And then we've since seen Europe commit significant regulation and funding support. So there is a clear market being established. We've been talking about geopolitical events. Back in 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the energy mix and portfolio changed overnight for Europe. We saw a doubling of demand forecast by 2030, which includes a total of 10 million tonnes imported for hydrogen to Europe by 2030. Decisions for new supply chains and new investments in technologies and green supply needs to be made in the next 2 years, so 24 to 25, to start to make any level of impact on that number. Next slide. So if we drill further down, you heard at the introduction, we've been successful in focusing on the German market. We've announced 3 MOUs with German utilities for supply, which is evolving through to key milestones in 2024. Germany is Europe's largest electrical market. If you look at the publication that was made in 2023, there, the ambitions of hydrogen in form of terawatt hours is between 45 to 90 terawatt hours. 33 terawatt hours is 1 tonne of hydrogen. So the reliance on up to 70% of that requirement is a 1.5 to 3 million tonne market by 2030. So the gap absolutely comes from imports. So whether it's a transition under regulations to green supply, whether it's many billions of dollars of capital now being supported to industries encouraged to transition, or whether it's utilities themselves. So the industry, it needs to scale, and it needs to get away quite quickly. Germany as a market as phasing out coal by between 27 and 29. It has banned the use of uranium, and it's absolutely reliant upon LNG imports. So previously Russia was importing over roughly 50% of its gas requirements at a low price. So it is a net importer for the rest of its decades. Next slide. So what do? We talk about an integrated supply chain. So we have a unique offering, which is the design of a large-scale transport and storage system. But ahead of that, we're also involved in the production of hydrogen export projects. So we're doing that with local partners under collaboration in Norway. We announced 2 in 2023. We've successfully completed strong pre-feasibility studies. And just this last week, we announced the extension of that collaboration, in particular with Norwegian Hydrogen, to look at further markets in the Nordics. In terms of shipping and storage, we have our proprietary ship design with the unique tank. We're the only ones doing bulk transport of compressed hydrogen, and we'll come back to that. And most importantly, it's great to have projects and technology, but how do you commercialize? So over the last year, we've been focusing particularly on the large German utilities who have significant import requirements. That has been successful in the conversion to MOU agreements in November, December, and again in April. We've been able to announce one of those, which is Uniper. Uniper is the largest importer of natural gas and are in the top 4 of energy production for Germany. More excitingly, it's great to have a long-term infrastructure story, but what's the near term for shareholders? So along the way, we've been looking at adapting our tank design into small-scale storage. There is a massive addressable market opportunity for that. We've been asked for the last 3 years, could you build a tank of a certain capacity and scale? And so we're now looking to do that on the back of our prototype tank. So that is a production story and potentially a cash flow story for 2024. So the revenue opportunities and value creation exist across production of hydrogen in equity partnerships, license fees for future ship design, a share of cash flow of those long-term charter agreements when those ships are put into service. And then we are underwriting the advancement of all that infrastructure with bringing the market to implementing the compressed hydrogen supply chain. So bringing the market to those solutions. So we are the only one with that opportunity. And as I mentioned, we have a very exciting revenue opportunity starting for small scale tanks in 24. Next slide. So if you look at it from a regional context, we opened our office in Oslo and made a commitment to Europe and Norway in particular in August 2022. That has translated to two export projects under local development. We've now extended that focus across what would be Norway and the Nordics, so being also Sweden and importantly Finland. We see that the regional opportunity for supply being the lowest cost. Our approach is up to 10 times more energy efficient on a regional basis. So in a market that's emerging, you want to be first to market, first mover, and also have the lowest delivered costs. And that's now starting to cut through. And that's cutting through because we're now announcing our relationships with the large utilities who will be the long-term offtake buyer. More recently, we've been looking at port access. So it's great to have production and a shipping solution, but how do you get that to market? So we announced last week a collaboration with a company called GES to develop an import terminal specific to hydrogen using our vessels. So they're doing both ammonia and hydrogen. So we have ambitions in the region of 250,000 tons. That's the equivalent of 1.5 gigawatts of capacity, and that equates to around 10 to 15 ships as a portfolio. If you look at the graphic on the left corner, it shows you that the top 4 energy providers in Germany are spending between 8, 14 to $50 billion in the next 5 to 6 years. So the focus is this is the market where you want to be active and commercializing your approach to delivering hydrogen. Next slide. So what is our core technology is our ship design. So it's a standard mid-range tanker where we have a proprietary tank. We started this process with what's called a basic AIP approval in 2021. We've done absolutely full feed and safety design studies and got approval for that ship fully designed in December 2022. The last step, which we're now taking to achieve what's called final class approvals to be ready to construct, is to develop a prototype scale of that tank. And we're now doing that in Norway. So that tank is currently under construction. And then we'll go through an extensive testing and safety process with an outcome being final class approvals targeted for the end of the second quarter. That unlocks ship build contracts, and then we'll be converting those MOU level discussions into binding level heads of agreement style outcomes. So 2024 is the ultimate point of final approvals, and then that will start to convert into binding commercial outcomes. Next slide. So this is a snapshot, again, an example of what we've done with our local partner, Norwegian Hydrogen. They are a very experienced developer of scaling up hydrogen production facilities. They are looking at operations in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. So it's important to have local partners. They are backed by a number of industrial companies, which includes Fortescue. And as we announced last week, we now have the confidence in the business model to quickly roll out new export sites and start to build a portfolio of production. Next slide. The tank opportunity, we have slowly started to release details. This is an enormous opportunity to take large scale tanks down to what we call small scale. Small scale is still 1 to 5 to 10 tank solutions. At the basic level, buffer storage of any industrial application using hydrogen is a requirement and adds flexibility and can lower the cost. To get into a market, again, we are competing against existing high pressure composite materials, and we're going to use low cost carbon steel. So the illustration on the right just shows you that we could be 1 to 2 times cheaper on a capital basis, and then the life cycle cost of hydrogen also come down. So again, we feel as though the prototype will give us an opportunity to start to look at orders for first sales in the second half of this year and see that delivered before the end, which gives us a 2024 revenue opportunity to start talking to shareholders about. Next slide. So catalysts for all microcap stocks are key. What are the key milestones? As we mentioned, by mid 2024 and in the coming months, you'll see us progress our prototype tank final class approvals. That gives absolutely everything we need to then start construction of vessels. Those vessels will be aligned with project developments. As we mentioned, first orders and sale of tanks in Q3, Q4 this year, and we're looking to see conversion of both projects around the supply agreements into more binding level agreements, and then have more visibility for our shareholders around what the term and scale of those contracts look like. And then along the way, you'll continue to see us announce new collaborations around export projects, whether they are shipping only or whether they are across the full supply chain. So that gives us the key catalysts of early revenue, equity share in projects, in long-term infrastructure projects, shipyard contracts, and then ultimately the big prize is FID decisions in 2025 on large project scales. So that's the summary of our presentation today, and we look forward to questions and any follow-up. We will be available.
Thanks, Martin. Really, really interesting. Plenty of questions here. First question is, how's the fabrication of the prototype scale tank proceeding, and have there been any issues in the fabrication process to date?
Yeah, so we've allowed a number of months to fabricate the first tank. We announced, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago now, that the fabrication is underway. I think towards the end of the month, we'll start to release some evidence of the progress. We are using automated robotics for laser welding to show that we can build these tanks, one, in a safe environment to meet those regulations, but also to reduce the cost of overall delivery. So this is a first of this scale, and it's proceeding well, and we'll start to show evidence of that towards the end of the month.
That's great to hear. And a technical question here. This person is asking, can you shed any light on the storage pressure and temperature envelopes that your proprietary storage system maintains?
Yeah, so the storage pressure, compressed hydrogen at 250 bar pressure, that's 3,600 psi equivalent. It's ambient temperature conditions, so no cryogenics, no boil off, there's no cargo loss once it's stored. So we fill the tank to 250 bar pressure, move to site and discharge.
And a question here, are there any local producers of hydrogen in Germany, and why is there a market opportunity to export the hydrogen from Norway?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, Germany is an import country of all its energy. It is limited in the available renewable energy source. So they are looking at offshore wind, they're looking at onshore wind conditions. If anyone has traveled in Germany, you will see a number of turbines. But for the amount of energy need that they have, it simply cannot meet demand based on what they plan for their decarbonisation activity. So we see evidence of the first 1 to 200 megawatt scale production level units in place. We hear that hydrogen is producing at 7 to 10, perhaps more dollars per kilogram on a euro basis. And just alone that if you could procure renewable energy in places like Norway at a lower cost, well, then your lower delivered costs will beat the local domestic product on a scale basis. So that's the opportunity. It's very clear.
That makes sense. And question here, is there potential for additional funding support from the Norwegian authorities or other European governments?
Yeah, so there is, we could spend 2 hours on this. There are, at the biggest level, there's $100 billion committed. So there are what they call Horizon R&D funding schemes. There are innovation schemes. There are H2 Global, and you've got the H2 Bank. Innovation Norway is also the funding mechanism for Norway, and we are in discussions about commercialization events. So we've moved from an R&D scenario in Australia to the final step in Europe, and I think we'll be focusing on the soft funding that gets you to the commercialization phase.
Gotcha. And a question here: who are the company's competitors, and how does Provaris' technology compare to them?
Yeah. So on a bulk scale, there's no one else doing compressed hydrogen in a shipping format. So there are containerized versions, so 1 ton container at 700 bar pressure. But that, if you're moving boxes, that doesn't give you a lot of volume. So it's about producing the largest volume of a tank in a vessel at the lowest cost. The alternate pathway is really at this moment is ammonia, but ammonia uses significantly more capital and energy to convert a hydrogen gas into an ammonia liquid and then convert that back into a hydrogen gas at the receiving end. So we're competing against the ammonia supply chain, but we see ourselves as an alternate and complementary rather than being competitive.
And one here. And what other areas in technical development is the company focusing on?
Well, I think the tank itself is proprietary to us. It's unique in the methodology of how we're going to be layering carbon steel. We've got a partner now who is demonstrating that you can fabricate and get approvals. So we've mentioned smaller scale for the same level of compression. The tank itself will take any liquid or gas. So it could be an ammonia liquid. We have a liner which manages issues around that. It could be CO2 liquid. So we are focused on what we see the immediate opportunity need, but the applications in the inbound inquiries revolve around all gases and all liquids. And it really just depends on what's the suitable use case. So it can open up to many parts of this transition.
And just to finish off, why don't you just remind us, what's the timeline for the completion and the testing of the prototype?
Yeah, so the target is, we call it mid-2024. So we expect construction to be completed during April and May, and then we're testing May, June. So that's what we've allowed the time. So the end of the quarter or mid-24, whichever metric you want to use.
Martin, absolute pleasure having you on today. We'll keep a very close eye on your journey, and we'd love to have you back on in the second half of the year. You have a great weekend.
Thanks very much, Paul.